Hello and welcome to our little documentary entitled A Listed Journey. We'll be taking you around the Triangle area, that's the three towns of Coleraine, Portrush and Portstewart, and having a look at some of the listed buildings that exist in those towns. My name's Robert Anderson, I'm a local historian and I'm going to be your guide for the journey around the towns. We started the documentary here in Coleraine Town Hall. This building dates from 1879. It was built to replace an earlier market house which had stood on this same site since about 1743. The building here was funded mostly by the Honourable Irish Society, who were responsible for the establishment of the town during the 17th century. It was built at a cost of about £4,000 and lasted very well until about 1991, when the building was seriously damaged by an IRA bomb just outside. The building then took something like £1 million to restore to its wonderful condition that we can see today. Another building we'll be looking at today is St Patrick's Church, another iconic building and another A-listed building within the town. St Patrick's Church was established by St Patrick in about the 5th century, when St Patrick was given a piece of ground on which to develop a church. That particular little church lasted right through until the early 17th century, when the town as we know it today was founded by the Honourable Irish Society. This plantation town, as it became, was laid out in a grid pattern, and St Patrick's Church formed a central part of the town at the time. The Irish Society built a new church in the 17th century. That church has been gradually updated and gradually improved right through until 1879, the building that we see today existing within the town. We're at the second of our three locations now. We're in Portstewart on our little tour called A Listed Journey. We're actually in Flowerfield House, which is now Coleraine Borough Council's Arts Centre. This building is the second building to stand on this site. The original Flowerfield House dated from 1710 and was built actually by the O'Neill family of Shane's Castle. The house was then taken over by the O'Hara family, who built Portstewart Castle. This particular building dates from about 1830. It was bought by the council in 1973 and has been extensively renovated and saved from the demolition people by the council. One of the few listed buildings left in Portstewart. The other main listed building in Portstewart is actually Cremore House, which is an A-listed building. Cremore House dates from the late 1700s. It was the home of the O'Hara family, who developed the town of Portstewart. Like the neighbouring town, Portrush, Portstewart was little more than a very small fishing village until the early years of the 19th century. It was the O'Hara family and the Cromie family who developed the town into the famous bathing resort of Victorian and Edwardian times. As a result of the Cromie family not allowing the railway line to reach Portstewart during the 1850s, the town has suffered a wee bit from a lack of development when compared with Portrush. The railway line turned away at Cromore Halt towards Portrush, and only after a few years did Mr Cromie allow the establishment of a tramway which ran from Portstewart town centre out to Cromore railway station. The only other listed building of any significance in Portstewart was Rock Castle, which was again built by the O'Hara family during the late 1800s. It was originally a dower house for Mrs O'Hara after her son had established the castle. Rock Castle was demolished completely during the 1990s, and in its place are modern apartment blocks. Sadly, one of the trends on this part of the coastline. Welcome to the third of our times in the triangle sequence in our little documentary, A Listed Journey. We're actually in Portrush Town Hall, which was built in 1872 and is one of the few listed buildings in Portrush. Prior to about 1827, Portrush was little more than a fishing village. The advent of a new harbour and the arrival of the railway line in the 1850s turned the town into a very popular Victorian and Edwardian resort. We have an interview with Marcus Patten, a well-known architect, who will give some further details of the building and its history.
My name is Marcus Patten. I'm the director of Hearth Revolving Fund, which restores buildings at risk. And one of the buildings we've been involved in is Portrush Town Hall, where we're in at the moment. The bit that we're sitting in at the moment is what was originally built in 1870 as the assembly rooms, and behind me you see a stage which was added on in the 1930s. The original assembly rooms would have been used for holding public meetings in, ballroom dances and things like that. Concert parties came here. Percy French performed here, for instance, for several times, and travelling music hall artists and people like that would all have come to Portrush and done their bit before moving on to the next town. In the days before television, people did move around with their act, and they didn't stay in one place and wait for the world to come to them. They moved around small town after small town, giving their act, and Portrush would have been one of those stops. As you can see, it's got an ornamental ceiling, quite a high ceiling with ornamental metal tie bars and trusses all coming together, and it's designed as a visual feature as well as a functional building. Over the years it changed a bit. The theatre was added on, say, in the 1930s, but then the cinema came in, and in front of me, out of the scene that you're seeing at the moment, the round part of the end of the building was blocked off with a projection booth, and that was fireproof. The cinema operator had to be in a fireproof container because the old film in those days was very flammable, and that blocked off the light from the end of the hall, and gradually the building just came to seem out of date. So in the restoration we've got rid of that cinema booth, which has opened up light into the end of the hall, made it a much more attractive space.
In front of the town hall, and dating from 1922, is the town's war memorial. It's unusual in the fact that it depicts the female form of victory. In addition to the female form, the war memorial contains a plaque a very interesting plaque of detailed warships from the First World War. The monument, of course, contains the names of all of the fallen from the town who served in both World Wars. One of the most photographed parts of Portrush in its tourist years is the Arcadia. The Arcadia began simply as a little tea room, a little cafe. It gradually developed over the years into a dance hall, very popular during the 50s and 60s. Many people will recall dancing in the Arcadia. Well, that brings us to the end of our little tour around the Triangle area. I hope you've enjoyed it. From me and from the director, goodbye and thank you.